Good afternoon, and thanks for coming back. So this is truly my idea of a culinary lunch and learn. So while you're lunching, we'll learn a little bit more about the culinary world. So today, Dr. David Corson will be the facilitator of the panel. David is the director of the Daniels College of Business Fritz Noble School of Hospitality Management and an associate professor since 2007. David, come on up.
Thank you, Lee. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Denver. I think you're going to, for those of you who've been here since the beginning, you will, by the end of the conference, have experienced all that Denver weather has to offer. We're supposed to get snow tonight. So I'm going to ask if the panelists will first introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about the practices that they're involved in, the business that they do, and then each is going to do a short presentation, and we'll follow that with Q&A. Sound good? Okay. Corey.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon. My name is Corey Nyman. I am the Director of Operations of the Nyman Group. I am in the second generation in our firm. We are a boutique hospitality consulting firm. We don't draw, we don't design, so just FYI. But we do create concepts, we do rebrands, redos, and I base in Las Vegas, Nevada, and travel and work around the world. And I am a very proud graduate of the School of Hospitality Management at the University of Denver.
I'm Tom Ricca, and I'm founder of Ricca Design Studios. We are kitchen consultants, which we'll talk about a lot in a few minutes. And one of my favorite things to say about our company is that we are the only firm of our type that have designed kitchens on all 7 continents. And we can say that because there's only 3 kitchens in Antarctica, and we did them all. So we're very happy to be here, and I am also a graduate of the hospitality school at DU and also an adjunct member of the faculty.
Hi, I'm Brooke Taylor. I'm the director of the interiors practice at ArcSign. We're a boutique architecture and design firm in Oakland, and we do both hotels and restaurants.
And Corey's going to kick us off. We'll start with the food.
Can everyone hear me? We good? Everyone eating? How's lunch? Good? Excellent. I didn't pick the menu, so I'm sorry. But I'm sure it's delicious, right, Lee? So talking about food, and we'll all work together and we'll get some other ideas, but in speaking about food and talking about trends, we have a lot of places to go. First, to infinity and beyond. So we've all seen the idea that trends are happening at a rapid pace, and the question is, and I was posed this morning, on what's a trend and what's a fad? And so when we talk about a trend, is it something that's going to be lasting and here for years to come and being developed? So when we talk about concepts and themes, right now, and you've heard it a little bit during the conference and the presentation earlier today, limited service and less table service, a little more casualization is really happening. The idea of fast casual, quick casual, upscale casual, these are really all lumped together. On the screen right now is an example of one in Chicago. It's called Firefin. It was more of a poke style concept. And is everyone familiar with poke? Yes? Is anyone not familiar with poke? What's that? Thank you. I will. I just wanted to make sure. I like that. Audience participation. So traditionally, poke is found in Hawaiian culture, and it's going to be a mixture of fish or other seafood that's blended with a soy, a shoyu, a little bit of sesame oil, sesame seeds, and red onion, green onion, etc. And that is a concept that's worked well, and it really allows flavors to marry. What's going on now in today's society of everything in a bowl with poke is quick poke. It's basically fish in a bowl, and it's not really allowing the flavors to marry unless they're sitting in that sauce. So, but these are really proliferating around the country, especially in the major metropolitan areas, and then to other areas from there. As I just mentioned, everything in a bowl. Assembly line menus and concepts. What worked for Henry Ford is working again. It's the idea that we are going down the line and we're basically being able to create flavors ourselves, whether it be walking in and in pizza, on a bowl, in a burrito, on a sandwich. The idea that you can make food for yourself in your own flavor, and that really makes sure that you are determining whether it's because of allergies, because of aversions, etc. And it works for all different levels and all different types of cuisine. So, and we're seeing that also in gluten-free versions, quinoa, different proteins, and using bolder flavors, curry, sriracha, and turmeric. As we see in some of our limited service properties moving forward, the idea of the grab and go, the coffee bars, the Starbucks, snacking, people are eating all day long. There's not one schedule that really is in our society anymore. The breakfast, lunch, dinner is there, but people are eating mid-morning, mid-afternoon, late into the evening. So in all of our hotels and a lot of our different venues, be they malls, clubs, arenas, people might want to have breakfast at 11 o'clock at night. They might want to have a sandwich at Starbucks because that's what they do. Who went to Starbucks this morning or another coffee place? I did too. Who got more than just a coffee? I did too. Interaction was about 5 minutes, 7 minutes at max. So it allowed us to get back to our emails, our phone calls, and really go about our daily business and then get back to the conference. Going, again, concept and theme, grab and go, hotels, resorts, city centers. It's all about the role of convenience. And here's a big thing. It's setting a baseline. Where do we want to start and where do we want to go? And I was speaking with Glenn Hausman earlier, and I hope you've all met him. He's a great friend, and we're talking about what is good versus good enough. And we talk about that all the time, and we can speak about it in food, and I know we can talk about it in design world especially, but what's good enough to have and what's good? So it's what's better than just good enough. And we really need to think about that in all we're eating and all we're drinking and how we're having these experiences. And then we're seeing much more nationally, regionally, and locally it's going to come about. If it hasn't happened yet, it's going to be coming. It's going to be hitting your shores. There's much more ahead. Here we're always skirting the balance of quality versus quantity. Does everyone face that in pretty much every one of their interactions, and every one of our contracts and our daily interactions? It's the balance of those two and meeting in the middle. Guests and patrons, and you'll see there's Gen X, Millennials, and Gen Z on my presentation. I don't believe in this, just to let you know, sincerely. I think that every generation has an element of Gen X, Gen Z, Millennial, Baby Boomer, etc. We all are learning from each generation. Each generation is teaching us something that has been brought about, whether it's technology, whether it's usage, whether it's faster paced, you name it, and they're allowing us to have those, whether it's experiential learning, traveling, whether it's going back and having less of tangibility. But each generation is going to bring about new and fresh ideas to us. It's very important. So I don't personally like to label each generation, but we do because we talk about it. It's easy to put groups into labels. So just when we can talk, I'm more than happy to speak about this offline. But Gen X, Millennials, Gen Zs, they're all going to bring about something that we either want or want to have in our lives and our experiences. Again, convenience, takeaway and takeout, food delivery services, home meal replacements. A lot of people are really enjoying the idea of being at home. They're enjoying the fact that they can cook at home, they can bring in ingredients and enjoy their home theaters, enjoy their couches, spend time with their children, spend time with their families. And also financial considerations, alcohol, driving laws changing constantly in every state, and then just the overall comfort of being at home. And multi-generational dining, having the ability to have grandma and grandpa at home with mom and dad and the kids, or going with aunts and larger families, uncles, etc., and cousins. So making sure that we can have an experience together instead of just out at restaurants. People want to stay at home and have their experiences. And then another trend is going on, not assuming about guests, because a lot of times we'll be at a restaurant, people will assume dish, talk about allergies, talking about aversions, talking about dietary preferences, religions, all these things that factor into who the consumer is, and making sure you ask the important questions every time, and when we're really embracing who our guests are. As we all know, changes are ahead. Everything changes every year at a faster pace, and so we do our best to try and keep up with it as much as possible. Food and beverage menus. This is something we talk about constantly. It's the center of the table, and the idea that sharing is here. Who regularly goes out to dinner and shares with their families, friends, everyone? Do you like dining that way? Yeah? It's more fun, isn't it? Get to try more flavors, get to experience other dishes. And so that's really here. And one of the things that we're seeing a lot, smaller plates have been around. If we want to call them tapas, if we want to call them cicchetti, you name it, we can call them whatever we want. And American tapas is a whole lot different than obviously dining around the world. But sharing for the center for dishes for 2 and 4 are coming back. These are things that were here for many years, whether it's a roast for the table, whether it's a rotisserie chicken with the accoutrement, you name it. If we can put a dish on the center of the table, have a center protein, and also have a couple of vegetables to go along with it, it's really going to allow for that greater experience. There's a great restaurant in San Francisco, we'll talk about that, Brooke, that makes a chicken dish. They make 6 a night, and it's fantastic, and it's in brioche, and it's wonderful, and they wheel it through the dining room. But you have to order it 48 hours in advance. So they're planting in the seed. This is also why we used to carry a gigantic 12-layer chocolate cake through the dining room while everyone was having dinner. So it's making sure we plant that idea. Next, the role of vegetables moving forward. Who likes vegetables? All right, we're doing good. Okay. I like meat as much as the next person, don't get me wrong, but the role of vegetables is here to stay. People are excited about the idea that there are heirloom carrots, roasting a whole head of cauliflower and serving it with a whipped side of ricotta and olive oil, using these great squashes, everything using fresh and seasonal, making sure that it's not enough just to say, I'm a vegetarian anymore. It's like, I want to eat vegetables tonight because I want to, not because it's part of a dietary choice. And making sure that, and a lot of chefs are really embracing that idea of using vegetables in the center of the plate, whether it's an accent of a meat and a protein, or just using herbs and flavors, making it fresh and seasonal as much as possible. And then the idea of grains.
Okay.
Yeah.
Keep going.
You good?
Yeah.
All right, good, thank you. All right. That's my point. Okay. So using rice, different rice, dried legumes, gluten-free pastas, different shapes, using orzos. And it's not just the dietary restrictions anymore. Who here in this room has a dietary restriction or a food aversion? Okay, it's a pretty good amount. And so making sure that, and we all change the way we eat and the way we dine, a lot of restaurants are taking that into account. Whether it's a vegan menu, a gluten-free menu, a seasonal menu, a local herb menu, all these different elements, making sure that we are really addressing what the guest's desires are. And then bolder flavors, using Indian, Hawaiian, Peruvian, spices and flavors in menus and recipes. Making sure we have a better definition of what local means. This is a kind of catch-all, and we've talked about it, David and I have spoke about it for many years, the idea. There was a trend many years in the 90s, ABC, always buy Colorado, for those of you who are here. It was around. And so that's here. But the question is, what is local? Is local your town? Is local your city? Is local your state, your province, your region? So making sure that's best defined as much as possible. Then, greater honesty in food. The removal of fillers, chemicals, whenever possible. Fresh, fresh, and fresh. That's really key in as much as possible today. Eating fresh and really using honesty in food and who we are. And then proteins and meats. No hormones, less hormones, the idea natural and possible, the role of turkey, pork, rather than just red meat and beef. And then when we are using red meat or some of these other proteins, the secondary cuts. Because it's one thing to have a New York strip steak, a T-bone, but having a skirt, a flank, a rib cap, a shank, and using our chef's abilities and knowledge to really serve the best dish that's on the table. How are we doing on time? You good?
You're okay.
I'm good? Okay. Just wanted to check. So, and then, again, and you heard me speak about it earlier, the idea of customization in food, and really, again, with that, thank you, Henry Ford, and being able to go down the line. Certain concepts, Chipotle, Sweet Green, Pizza Rev, Mad Greens, making sure that we can get what we want, how we want it, when we want it, and serving it in a bowl of lettuce, on pizza, sandwiches, etc. Really, it all lends itself to convenience. Coffee and tea remain extremely hot. That pun wasn't intended, I'm sorry. I apologize. But the idea of using specialized ways to do it, whether it's brewing in a sachet, whether it's in a glass pot, the idea that, especially coffee stations, who's here, who has seen the Starbucks Reserve location? It means something. It's truth in food. It's truth in presentation. When it's right in front of you, you can see it, you can touch it. Who's been to the Pete's Slow Bar in Georgetown? All right. Okay. So, yeah, of course. So, but the Pete's Slow Bar is a store within a store, basically. It's its own counter. And so basically being able to create these concepts, and then in full-service restaurants, there are custom coffee carts, whether it's a V60 or a pour-over. I can tell you, and we'll talk about this in San Francisco, a friend of mine has a 27-square-foot coffee bar in San Francisco. Hole in the wall. And he serves pour-overs, which he can only do 5 at a time, and he serves cold brew. And that's all he does. And it's a walk-up business. but it's in the neighborhood. It fits the area and fits what he's going for. He's about to open his second one. It's huge, 99 square feet. But he's fitting the market. That's the best thing. So he's really gone to what his guests are desiring. And then juice. Juice is extremely hot. Vegetables. It's a big thing as an appetizer or dessert, not just for cold press, not just for a detox anymore. Cocktails, less is more. I'll be the first to admit I think mixology is dying. That's my opinion. It's still around, don't get me wrong, but I think having 5 to 7 ingredients in a drink is going to go away. We'll see a lot more classics. We'll see a lot of 2, 3, 4 ingredient cocktails coming back. And really that goes to truth and flavor. Making sure that if we're going to do something, let's do it really well, and let's do it for the guests. And then at the end of the day, it's really all about service and delivery. It's all about, no matter what technology is going to be there, it is all about the hospitality and the delivery of customer service, because nothing will ever take away the one-on-one with us and a guest, ever. And then design, I'm going to leave this to you, Brooke. So, but having options and using different materials. And then a big thing that we're seeing and we believe in is communal tables that were built many years ago, 15, 20, 25, they're going to be smaller now. We're really going to see that 6 to 8 seats, maybe 10 seats, so it's a little more flexible. And also if they're mobile, please make your restaurants mobile as much as possible so guests can have that different experience overall. And then different materials, whether it's resin, wood, recycled. That's it. Thank you very much. And
Time is up.
I'm going to turn you over to Tom Ricca.
Thank you, Corey. I just want to add on to a little bit of what you're talking about, the drinks. I just read a report in the last 2 or 3 days about the drinks of each decade of the 20th and 21st century. And in 1900, the most popular drink was the old-fashioned. And in 2016, the most popular drink is the old-fashioned. I mean, we've gone full cycle. And my drink has gone away. In fact, no one probably heard of it. A Harvey Wallbanger? Sure. Oh, okay. There's a few of my generation out there. Anyway, I'm here to talk about kitchens. And I can say that in the early part of my career, I'd go to meetings with designers, architects, engineers, owners, people who are interested in our project, and we'd have 20 people in a room, and we'd be talking about this project for several hours, and then the agenda would turn to kitchens, and the room would empty. I'd be left alone with the chef and maybe the mechanical engineer who was interested in how much air we were going to exhaust. So, lock the doors, Joanne. Anyway, we're going to talk about what have we seen happening in kitchen over the years. The thing that kind of changed my life happened in the early 90s, and a concept called Move and Pick Marché came to Toronto. And the marché was a concept where food platforms were arrayed around the dining room, and different cooking stations happened, and the guests grazed from one to the other, picked up their food, and dined with it. That struck a chord with every college and university in the country. And they all flocked to Toronto to see the marché. So what happened in the 90s was that almost every university dining center was remodeled or rebuilt with platform dining as its theme. So all of the students that were in college in the 90s and the first 10 years of the 21st century got used to being able to see their food being cooked to order, see how it was prepared, see where the ingredients came from. The reduction of the kitchen, we had almost no kitchen left when we did that. It was only storage and dishwashing, and everything else was in the front of the house. And so we had this energy created with all of this cooking and things going, all 5 senses are engaged in the process. And so I believe that if you were born between 1985 and 1990, You experienced this when you were in college, and at the same time, travel overseas started. We had semester abroad, which really flourished starting at that time. Almost everybody now in my classes at DU have all been overseas. I think all of us see that more people are traveling internationally than ever before, and what happens? We all have seen this great fascination and understanding of international food and the true way it's prepared. My son can't stand that nobody in Denver has tacos al pastor the right way, because he knows the right way. So what do I think that means? I think that the markets we're designing for now, and our restaurants of today, are for a whole new generation, and it's one that I call the food savvy generation. And I think most of you in this room are in that group. You really are aware of food. You know where it comes from. You know how it's prepared. You have tasted lots of different flavors. And so the platform way of dining is a perfect way to demonstrate that. So moving on, how did that evolve from all those colleges into the hospitality field, food? Well, we have seen Marché kinds of platforms, starting at Disney World's the first one that we happen to work with, and we'll show you a picture of that in a second. But all of these stations just create so much energy, and they involve kitchens to a great extent. We have to plan a whole different series of ways of designing the kitchen than we used to. Now we've seen in the Pacific Rim especially, here's Disney World in Orlando. That was the first one. This was in the mid-90s. They did this, literally a Marché concept at Coronado. The Park Hyatt Incheon, which is just outside of Seoul near the airport, had 8 stations where chefs are cooking everything from dim sum to noodles to sushi. People are grazing. And this is a Park Hyatt, which is a 5-star hotel and is still going today. The Kerry in Shanghai, which is a Shangri-La property, has taken Marché to the ultimate limit. Shangri-La Pudong, you can see the roasting ducks drying here on the display of the food. They have walk-ins where the inventory is in glass. You can see in the walk-ins. I mean, everything is honest. Corey used that word honest before, and I think that's what Marché is known for, is that it's honest about how the food is and where it comes from. We have tandoori ovens here and duck roasting ovens and all of that. So the Grand Hyatt in Beijing, if you're in China, you can't miss one of these kinds of locations. The first one that I saw in Las Vegas was Sensei at the Bellagio, which was literally cooking theater in the round. The kitchen was in the center of the room, and all of the cooking went on. Everybody who was a guest got to experience that and savor it. Cooking suites, getting technical for a second. The way most show kitchens of today now are staffed are with show kitchens. And these are different than the line that you are used to seeing with a cooking line against the back wall and then a counter in front of it and the servers coming up to the counter. The chefs all have their back to the room. The cooking suites, also known as piano suites or Waldorf suites or Euro kitchens, they're all the same thing, are where the chefs work opposite each other, in parallel to each other, and they're working the food toward the front, and they're talking to each other, and they're almost it's almost like a dance when you watch them working. They're choreographed to get the product together in the right time. You will see this, if you haven't already, in some of your designs. The show kitchens will have this type of cooking suite. What's happening now with the kind of Marché? The latest version we're seeing is being called immersive kitchens, where In the original platform design, the chef was separated from the guest by a counter where all of the preparation and assembly and food displays happened, but you had a barrier between the guest and the chef. In immersive kitchens, they are together. We are literally immersing guests right in the kitchen where things are happening. And you can see this at the Chef's Club in New York City, the Mercer Kitchen in New York City. There's been a lot of written about those two locations, and if you're from or around New York City, it's worth going to see because it really is the latest in kitchen evolution. We worked on in the Four Seasons in Beijing that was even a step further than that, where the guests actually went into the cooking area to get their food if they wanted to, or to watch it, or to talk to the chef, or to just watch what was happening. It's really an interesting development. So what's going on in more casual areas? Well, the market restaurant concept, which is most exemplified by Italy, if you know that concept, in New York, Boston, and Chicago, where it is a large combination. Have you seen Italy, by the way? It's a wonderful combination of sit-down restaurants, walk-up restaurants, sushi bars, butcher shops. It's got every kind of retail food, take-home, ready-to-eat foods. You can get cooking appliances there, books on cooking, go to cooking classes. And one of the things that I always do when I go to NRA in Chicago is go to Italy. I just love watching it, how it just functions. So, by the way, you all going to HD? For some reason, HD and NRA always overlap every year in May. So part of my family goes to Las Vegas, and part of our family goes to Chicago. I would love to show my wife Italy, but I doubt I guess we have to go to Chicago, except in the NRA, huh? But if you are in Chicago or New York, and I think in Boston, go see it. It's worth seeing, especially as designers, because it is such a combination of all sorts of events. Then we have the food hall phenomenon. I just read there are 200 food halls in development right now in the United States. You've probably seen some of them in all your cities. They are basically industrial kinds of buildings with startups and pop-ups and incubators. Mom and pops who want to try out their form of fried chicken can get a spot for very little money, very little capital, and try it out. And we've seen some of these incubator concepts grow from just a little 20 square foot shop in a food hall to a food truck to a full service restaurant, just because they've been, others go away. So our job in the kitchen business is to plan these food halls so that they can be flexible, so that concepts can come and go without damaging the infrastructure, and so that they're ready to go for the next one. And we've got 3 or 4 of them here in Denver. The Source is the first one, I think, and it's Avanti is right up the street. You can see that. And one of the things that happened in food halls, Corey was talking about the coffee evolution. One of the things we've seen in several of the food halls that we work with is that they are going to a full process of roasting beans, grinding beans, blending them, and then producing the coffee. And it is challenging us. We have to learn about coffee roasters, and we have to learn about how the grinders work in a commercial area as opposed to the Starbucks kind of location. But we're seeing more and more of that full process, and there's the Starbucks you talked about are doing in Seattle, doing classes, teaching people about the grinding, roasting, and blending process, and also tea lounges featuring nothing but teas of all sorts of varieties. Again, we're learning how to brew different teas all at once. Oops, I went the wrong way. And we've got some clients that are really celebrating the mixologists, the bartenders, the mixing drinks. I'm not sure how long that'll be. They call themselves the celebrity chefs of the current age. But the one thing about bars that I did want to show you is that in our last trip to Shanghai, we saw in several cases these bars where the back bar is no longer just a counter behind the bar. It is now perpendicular islands. I don't know if you can see how clearly you can see that, but they're perpendicular islands with all the inventory, all the working area, all the refrigeration in these little islands that create workspace for the bartender that is really tight and really labor efficient, so the bartender can really work well. And we get twice as much inventory in this kind of a setup as we do in a standard back bar. And the advantage in this particular location was it was on the 93rd floor of a building in Shanghai, and the windows behind the bar, so that you were looking down into the city instead of across a bar top that you would see nothing but sky. And so it was a beautiful solution, and I'm going to copy it when I can. But and that is what's going on in kitchens. Basically, we're a lot more on display, and we get to go to meetings with all you people, and we get to say things about how circulation and queuing should work, and we love being a part of that initial planning. But thank you.
Brooke.
Here's Brooke Taylor.
Hello, everyone. So, I'm going to be talking about culinary trends from a design perspective, and there are three that I'm going to talk about, and they're all, unsurprisingly, centered around technology. So the first one speaks more to what Corey started to talk about, which is this rise of fast casual. It's a segment that got pioneered by Chipotle and Panera, but has really started to grow and expand and become a much more layered segment. So why is that? Well, we all know we don't have enough time, so we're all cooking less, am I right? We're eating out more, but we don't have the time or the budget for like the leisurely upscale meal that we'd like to have. And so it's, it's a popular option when it's fast and it's good. And it's fast and it's good because you have this generation that grew up in an age of connectivity and with farm to table, and so their quality and speed expectations are very high. Plus, you have the older segment of that generation that's now having kids, and they want somewhere to go with their kids that is more interesting than burgers and pizza. And one of the beautiful things about fast casual is that upscale and family friendly are not mutually exclusive. Plus, as we all know, real estate and labor costs are out of this world, and with fast casual, you can do more with both, more with less of both. So in terms of the design aspect, our challenge is how do we dispel the corporate and sterile image of the fast casual segment? So 3 ways, there are many ways, but I'm going to talk about 3. We can play up the local, like we do with a hotel. We play up what's interesting about the local and give it some context. So on the left is one of our projects. It's a growing burger chain in San Francisco. The aesthetic will be pretty consistent across the stores, and there will always be a mural, but the mural list will change and the content will change to reflect the location. So for example, this one's in the Tenderloin in San Francisco, mid-market. And it has a very long jazz history, so this is playing to that heritage. In the middle, you have the most recent installation of Mendocino Farms in Southern California, and this was not our project, but we are working with them on their Northern California expansion. They have a very interesting philosophy about seating. Since as fast casual, their revenue isn't dependent on tables turning, they can invite people to linger, and so they take a more residential approach to seating. It's more comfortable. Yes, of course, it's still durable and maintenance friendly, but when you take that mindset, it's more upscale and it's more inviting and it's memorable. And then finally, if we're going to elevate this segment of fast casual, it's time to ditch the DIY. No more chicken feeder lights hanging from a pallet. The concept is right. You want to warm up the space, a space like this, with handcrafted touches. But it needs to shift to a more refined expression of that. So the second trend is increased automation, and that's specifically increased automation with the customer experience. There's been an explosion of delivery apps, and people are using order ahead all over the place. I mean, we've got DoorDash, Postmates, Caviar, Uber Eats, Amazon's getting into the game. I don't know how many of these are outside of our tech bubble Bay Area, but I do know that order ahead is getting used really widely. And so that's something that we're studying pretty intently with Pete's Coffee for their next generation store design, hence my Georgetown Slow Bar visit. So we're talking a lot about how much space does this need? The volume of online orders can be really overwhelming at peak times, and so it's affecting the amount of space needed at that pickup counter. You've got people that are specifically dedicated during those peak times just to order ahead orders. So it's, is it 2 linear feet? Is it more? Does it need to be a percentage? As we all know, again, real estate's at a premium, so whatever the solution is has to accommodate that volume of orders, but also be as efficient as possible. Again, back to Mendocino Farms, they're struggling with the delivery drivers. So they've got 10 or a dozen delivery drivers waiting in areas that weren't designed to accommodate them, and so it's just awkward. So for their Northern California stores, we're talking about how do we design a space for them that doesn't take away tables from customers who stay, and that also is functional when it's slow. At the extreme end of the automation spectrum is Eatsa. Has anybody been to Eatsa? Okay. This is a concept where you either order ahead on your phone on their app, or you place your order at the iPad kiosks that you can see in the image. When your order's ready, one of those cubbies in the back lights up with your name on it, and your food is inside. You do not have to speak to a single person. There is a host at each location, but you don't have to talk to that person if you don't want to. So my question is, in these kinds of spaces, how do we maintain a sense of hospitality? You could argue that it's not really applicable because this is more of a transaction than a dining experience. But realistically, if you think about it, again, compressed time, you think about future labor models, everyone's figuring out how to do more with fewer people, unfortunately. And so it's going to evolve. I mean, you look at this one and you look at like the color temperature of the lighting, and it's very slick and clearly tech influenced. But if you take the tone a little warmer, focus on a tactile experience for the guest, you can see it being popular. And let alone, driverless cars for delivery, drones for delivery. It's not that crazy. This is probably part of our future. So in that case, you have to rely on the environment to substitute the warmth when you don't have any human interaction. And finally, we all have a need for nurture. So I don't think it's surprising that social media has some negative effects. People are using social media interaction to substitute true social interaction, which means that people are becoming ill-equipped to talk to other people, and it's creating a lot of anxiety in social interactions. When you compound that with a general uncertainty about what's going on these days, where we're all headed, it makes for an uneasy environment. And so that emotional environment is prompting these aesthetic trends, such as palettes of soft pinks and incorporating a lot of greenery, palettes from nature. These are soothing, they feel restorative, and they're emotionally nourishing, and there's going to be a lot more happening. So another way that the nurture is happening is nostalgia, and there's two variations of that. There's tapping into childhood memories that usually involves games and group play. You can kind of think of it as an evolution of comfort food. So now we have Miss Pac-Man and Skee Ball to go along with our tater tots and mac and cheese. The interesting thing about this is that it's a structured social interaction. So people who have a lot of anxiety about social interactions can much more easily engage with a stranger versus just, heaven forbid, striking up a conversation out of nowhere. And then one other variation of the nostalgia is hearkening back to a particular era or a place that has a very romantic sense of history. And contrary to popular belief, the generation who shall not be named does care about history. It adds to the sense of authenticity. There's a story that is genuinely important. So that said, these are actually two of our projects who have kind of fallen into that category. One is a Cajun restaurant that's bringing that eclectic yet very classic New Orleans sensibility to San Francisco. And then the other one is a cocktail bar that is inspired by the grandeur of an old hotel bar, just minus the hotel. So, these are spaces that are meant to transport you, to give you a moment of respite, hopefully, from that grasp of technology, at least for the duration of a Sazerac or two. So, those are the trends according to Brooke. Shameless plug, we're hiring, come find me. Thank you.
Thanks, Brooke. So, in the few remaining minutes that we have, I have a couple of questions, because there's some nice points of intersection, but also some gaps that exist across the three presentations. So, Brooke, the last piece you mentioned was that need for nurture, or the desire for nurture. So, and we've talked a lot about the customer's involvement in the provision of the service, right? Through fast casual concepts, through the whole marché movement. So, how does that mesh with the need for nurture, the customer engagement in the provision of service itself?
I mean, I would say that it's kind of going to be a polarized thing. Corey and I were talking last night about how there is no middle anymore. It's high end, and then it's low end, fast casual, whatever you want to call it. And I think it's going to be the same way. You're going to have places like Itza where you don't interact with a single person, and that's just about efficiency. But then you're going to need to offset that with very intimate experiences. So I think there's still going to be both.
So, which feeds into the next question, and maybe Corey, you can address this, about the future of fine dining. I mean, if what we've done through fast casual and automation is eliminate the service provider from the experience, is there still going to be a demand for fine dining?
There will always be a demand for fine dining. There will always be a realm of history and a reason to have a better than expected experience. And the fact that fine dining from the 70s and the 80s and the 90s became so approachable, it became dining became less special. That's what happened. And fine dining, being able to dine somewhere once every 6 months, every year, have that once in a lifetime meal, that's going to be there. There'll be less of those restaurants because there's going to be a market correction. I think, Brooke, you've seen that especially in San Francisco. But it's going to be that better than expected experience on the quick serve as well, where you can go to a Chipotle, a Mad Greens, any of them, and have a fantastic service delivery because you were there and someone was trained. It goes back to that one-on-one interpersonal interaction, for sure.
So one of the things that popped during the talk was around home meal replacement and the idea of people bringing food home, and you talked about that in terms of automation as well. There are services that deliver food in a box, right? Ingredients in a box to your home, where you can pick them up, and then you cook them yourself, or you put them together in your kitchen yourself. Is there a place for restaurants to play in that space? And if there is, what does that look like in terms of design, in terms of menu, in terms of the demands on a kitchen?
Well, I'll start. I think it doesn't make much difference to the kitchen. We still are preparing the same menu that we're serving in the restaurant, But I see a lot of delivery of restaurant meals to homes happening. I see our clients wanting us to design places where that can be a dedicated order and takeout process. Maggiano's is a great example of they have a takeout business that is just booming. You order on the phone, go pick it up, and take it home, and it's a great piece of their business.
Yeah, and if you're thinking about Blue Apron style or Gobble or Sunbasket, et cetera, I have seen that more chefs are getting featured as having put together the menu. So there's that aspect of, kind of cross-branding. It would be interesting to see how that might actually be part of an individual restaurant's revenue. How that might, is that a way that you activate daytime that you don't normally? I mean, that could be really interesting.
We're actually doing that right now. We're developing a steakhouse, which happens to be not far from here, but not in Colorado. That's 250 seats, and it has a dedicated takeout window through the bar and lounge, and there will be a whole meal replacement role there. That's not going to be our primary focus, but that's going to be a big thing because we are only going to serve dinner for the first year of operations. We have a gigantic kitchen we're building for it. We have 3 private dining rooms, so we want to make sure we have our labor force and we can address that. And we also have created a flying kitchen, which our whole idea through that same door, our focus is going to be rotisserie chicken. Who here has ever had a rotisserie chicken from Costco? Or any takeout rotisserie chicken? You can build a meal around that pretty easily, can't you? So it's the same idea. So figure out as a restaurant how to maximize, just like Mendocino Farms is doing, what can you use as center of the plate to lead into the other things. And as a restaurant, we want all the revenue we can, whether you're in our building or not.
We probably have time for one last, and it's sort of a spin on a conversation that happened earlier this morning in a different session. Given the labor pressures that we're seeing in the industry, particularly in the kitchen, what are the implications if those pressures continue to grow? What are the implications in terms of concept, design, and in the kitchen?
Well, we've always focused on labor savings, reducing steps, trying to keep the kitchens designed so that we use as few hands as possible to produce a quality meal. I'm really concerned about, over 50% of the hospitality labor force nationwide is immigrant, and over 50% of the construction industry nationwide is immigrant. And so if we cut down that source, we're going to have, and right now I have chefs complaining that they can't hire. In Colorado, believe it or not, one of the places we've lost our chef base to is the marijuana industry. The chefs find they can earn as much money doing marijuana with a lot shorter hours and a lot less stress, and I've had 2 or 3 different clients say to me, I can't find chefs, they all want to work in the marijuana industry. So
less stress for multiple reasons.
I didn't want to go there.
I'm kind of waiting for the craziness that is in San Francisco to develop into some interesting kitchen solutions, because chefs, cooking staff, line cooks, dishwashers cannot afford to live in San Francisco. Right. So you can't get the labor force, you can't hire, it's really, really challenging. And then on the other side, you have this fascinating industry that's constantly disrupting something. And so I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm surprised we haven't heard anything yet. I feel like it's imminent. I don't know if it's robots or drones in the kitchen. That sounds horrible, but yeah, people are going to start figuring out ways to make do with the shortage.
It'll definitely continue. Then to Tom's point, it's all about the labor force and trying to simplify the steps and how many people touch it. We're seeing this in quick serve quite a bit. If you go to McDonald's in Canada, I know many people might not eat McDonald's in this group, but they have kiosks in every one of their stores. And that's where they're going to save labor. It's all about the interaction and the pre-order and to eliminate one person or one shift, and it's going to happen. And that's going to keep trickling down. The question is what restaurant or what group and how it's going to impact upon unions and the minimum wage overall. If you go to San Francisco, $15. If you go to Berkeley, $17.50.
And when minimum wage rises, it's rising not for people who are already cooking. It's rising for everybody who's in other industries, because I know in San Francisco, in order to find somebody to be in your kitchen, you have to pay well in excess of $15 for a dishwasher. So, and the same thing is the case here in Denver. So, as we see minimum wage rising, it's the impact on us, on the restaurant industry, is really minimal. It's really about where the labor pool is, and is there a labor pool? I know you all have places to be. We're at time, so thank you very, very much for your attention. I hope you found it useful.